Everyone gets a bit of art block every now and again. I've personally just come out of one, and I found that the best solution is not to think about what you're creating, but how you're creating it. In art school, I took a very heavy focus on creative storytelling and world building, which means I had to get pretty creative with the tasks that I set myself. So in this video, I thought that I would share some of my favorite mini projects that helped me explore new corners of my world. Hello everybody, if you don't know me already, my name's Janie. I'm an artist, world builder, and creative storyteller, and I have my very own fantasy world called Hexium. Hexium is a world 2.5 years in the making, and it is a very magical place full of witches, folklore, and whimsy. My world has been through a lot of different contexts. It started as an animation pitch bible, then I took a shift to comics, and now I'm exploring it through craft, so I've tried a lot of different ways to world build. I'll reference Hexium a bit when I give examples of some of my exercises I've tried, so if it piques your interest, I've talked a lot about it in my past few videos. Feel free to check those out, but for now I'll stop rambling and get into it. So the first one I wanted to talk about was one-page comics. I think that comics are a really great way to introduce your world in a manageable and not too overwhelming way. And there's a lot of different approaches you can take here. I started with comics as a character building exercise for my Mountain Witch, and I just tried to explore different aspects of their life. For example, what do they do for fun? What's their day-to-day schedule like? And what makes them happy? Just considering little things like that. I also tried to change my stylistic approach in each, and it really helped me discover what kind of mood and setting I wanted Hexium to have. I've also tried scenic one-page comics that just jump from different aspects of a place, and I think that can be a really great way to develop an area of your world. If you know my Blood Witch, then you know that she lives in this little pink Conestoga wagon in the woods, and I did a couple panels just exploring what the interior of that looked like. She also lives in a place called the Wandering Forest, so similarly I just did some glimpses into the kind of plant life and animals that live there and just tried to capture the mood of the place. And I think this can be really effective if you don't really like doing full illustrations or drawing on a large scale. These are just quick little exercises that give glimpses into a place. So that's the way that I've explored one-page comics, but I wanted to share my biggest inspiration so that maybe you can think of different ways to utilize this exercise. So in Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, he discusses the 6 different type of sequences that you'll find in comics or graphic novels. The first one is moment to moment. It is a very small transition that shows subtle differences such as movement in somebody's eyes, and this usually acts as a breather for the reader and slows down the pace a little bit. Then there's action to action, which is one of the most frequent ones you'll see in comics, where it focuses on one subject but it's a bit quicker than moment to moment. Then there is subject to subject, which will focus on one scene but different subjects within the scene. Then there is scene to scene, which will jump to different places or different periods of time, and I think this can be one of the most challenging ones because I always find it a bit difficult to show big time gaps in comics. Aspect to aspect kind of ignores time for a moment and just shows different objects within a scene. And this is where I got my inspiration for my little square comics. I think it's a really great way to just set the mood of a place and build up locations. And the last one is non sequitur, and this one kind of has no logic between panels. And I haven't tried this one, but I think it could be a really cool way to explore your characters or fantasy cultures in the world by just finding objects or things that represent them. It's almost like a comicified mood board. So I mention those because I think it could be inspiring to think of the different sequences that you can work with. It's what gave me the inspiration for my square comics because I didn't really consider making a comic without some sort of narrative or dialogue in it before, but really any sequence of images will tell a story of some sort whether you mean it to or not. And if you do get into comics for world building, then I think Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics is one of the most valuable resources you can have. So yeah, I think that one-page comics are just a really great low commitment exercise that allows you to experiment with different things. So the next one is the most recent exercise I've tried, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm basically working on a series of Pokemon-inspired cards that explore the different plants and animals in my world. Not only will this help you explore the flora and fauna that live in your world, but it's also an easily digestible way for other people to read about them. Mine are fairly simple and just completely descriptive, but nothing's stopping you from making a little game out of it or marking out their abilities more in depth and just having fun with it like that. Something that I'm really happy I discovered with this is an animal classification system. This is just something that I've never really considered before. Obviously in Pokemon there's different types, and in the real world we have mammals, reptiles, amphibians, etc. I just document mine with a little icon in the corner based on the environment that they live in, which yeah, it's pretty simplistic, but if you watch my videos then you know I love categorization. I think the more little exercises you do around your world, the more things that you'll start to consider that you've never even thought of before. World building can truly be a never-ending thing so long as you want it to be. I mean, when you think about it, we're still discovering new things about Earth on a daily basis, and it can be the same for your world too. So the next one I wanted to talk about are mini pocket guides. One of the quickest and easiest ways you can do this is by making a zine. I've moved recently, so I can't find any of my zines anywhere, but basically all you need is one sheet of paper and you fold it and cut it a certain way so that it just makes a little booklet. And this is one from my friend James, so yeah, you should check them out. So yeah, super simple and easy to make. They're 8 pages and you can find tutorials for them anywhere online. There is a lot that you can do with a zine, but my favorite exercise I've done is making a pocket guide to my mountain witch. You can probably tell that I have a bit of a favorite character here. And in it, I just went over different things about them, like their clothes, their hobbies, their role in the world, their home, and things like that. And it was just nice to have it all in one consolidated place. And it's a great way to make sure that they're fleshed out as a character. Maybe you have a checklist for all the things that you want to write about them. And once again, it's just an easily digestible thing for other people to read. There's so much potential with zines. I made another one called Rat Tinder, which is not related to Hexam in any way. But in this one, I just made different rat personas and made it as if you were swiping through Tinder profiles of them. But yeah, there's just so much that you can do with zines. You can do a plant classification guide, you can do a fantasy travel guidebook, maybe even a historical timeline mapping out the different histories of a place, and just things like that. So yeah, I just think guidebooks are a lot of fun and it helps you think of new points you want to cover about your world. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about was model making. I got into polymer clay as a hobby recently and it's just kind of grown from there. I've made a bunch of little creatures, but what's really hit home for me is my little Choco-Ranchula character here. This is a spider that lives in my world and it's made entirely out of cocoa. And the reason that I like this one so much is because it is a life-size replica of what it would be in my world, and it feels like I just pulled it directly out of Hexium. And then I also have a dish called Spellbound S'mores in my world, which I've also made to scale. They're basically just these enchanted s'mores that tell a little story before you eat them. But yeah, I just love life-size models. I like that you can hold it in your hand and it feels real. Then I have another one called an Apricottage, and this one's obviously not to scale, but I think doing mini models of bigger things is also really cute too. I'm always going to advocate for making tangible items that you can actually touch from your world, because I think having that physical connection just helps you connect with it on a deeper level. And yeah, it's evolved into other things too. I've started making these witch hat pins, and each of them represents a different character. And I actually wrote a whole blog about it on my website. I'll leave the link in the description if you want to check that out. So yeah, if you are like me and you potentially want to sell your art around your world, I think that can be a really great way to do it. But it's also just a great conversation starter. I wear my pins out a lot in public and it's fun to just have something on you that represents your world. But also I think it's just such a wonderful hobby to have in itself. You can make little life-size things like coins and currency, maybe consider the insects like I did with my Choco-Ranchula, or you can try making mini models of larger things like buildings and animals and things like that. And if you're unfamiliar with polymer clay, this is the kind that I use. You just buy little packets of whatever color you want, but if you start to rack up a lot of colors, it can get a bit expensive. If you want a cheaper version, then they also make an air dry clay that you can buy in these larger packs for less than $10 usually. And it's great because you don't have to put it in the oven, you just leave it out to dry, but you will have to paint it to get the colors that you want. If you are a complete beginner to clay, I would really recommend the air dry version because it's just a bit easier to manipulate and control. But yeah, it's definitely one of like the messier crafts on this list, but I think there's just such a big reward and satisfaction that comes from it. So now that we've discussed clay, I can get into 3D terrain maps. It sounds super complicated and daunting, but they're actually really easy to make. And I actually just made a fantasy map making video and completely forgot to talk about this, which was just devastating. But yeah, as part of one of my projects, I wanted to explore the geography and physical terrain of my world a little bit more. I focused on one of my nations called Yorsum and decided to make a 3D textured map of the surface. All that I did here was take a big piece of cardboard, trace out the shape, and then I use that Fimo air dry clay to kind of map out the surface. It sticks to the cardboard completely fine without any glue or anything, and once it dries you can paint it to your liking. But yeah, I just think it's a super cool thing to have, and it also helps you consider the geography a bit more in depth. When I made this, I actually ended up adding some new places to my map because I noticed there were some more empty areas than others, and I didn't realize this because when my map was hand drawn I had text covering large parts of it. I realized without all the city titles and locations on it that it was just empty land underneath it. So yeah, once again, it's just super fun, inexpensive, and very hands-on. So the next one sounds kind of weird, but you'll just have to hear me out really quick. So I've been kind of refurbishing or transforming different things that I found collecting dust in my parents' basement. I found this woodsy lamp lying around, and it had the perfect little frame for me to put my art in it. I have a character called the Woodland Witch that I thought fit the theme perfectly. So all I did was measure it, print it out, and Gorilla Glue it down. And yeah, I did the same here. I had a little napkin holder that had the perfect little square for just a drawing to fit in it. And the last one, I've been working on making my bathroom a bit more swamp themed because one of my favorite places in my world is called Goop Village. It is what it sounds like. It's a swamp. It's very goopy. So I found these little frames for like $1 the other day and just slapped my art in it. And yeah, I know it's slightly less creative putting art in a frame, but yeah, just keep an eye out for little things like that. And I know the items that I used are very niche and not things that people just have lying around, but I thought it might still spark some inspiration. So, you know, maybe you have something old lying around that you can transform, and maybe you're much more talented in DIY things than me and can do something even cooler. I haven't really done anything like this yet, but I think it would be super cool to recreate objects as if they were that object from your world. For example, if you have a lamp, maybe you could think about what lamps would typically look like in your world and transform it to reflect that. Quick side note, I am a digital artist, so obviously I've printed out all of these things, but it's fully possible to do it traditionally as well. I do love my printer, however. If you're looking for one, I definitely recommend the Epson ET2800. She has served me right. And the last exercise that I wanted to talk about today is fantasy menu making. And if you like the sound of this one, I am actually thinking about my next video will be a tutorial on how I do my fantasy foods and cuisines, so be sure to follow if you're interested in that. But yeah, basically I have a little pub in my world called the Broom Saloon, and I thought it would be really fun to make a menu from that. This helped me think of regional dishes, fun drinks, and just overall helped me develop the culture on a deeper level. There is a lot of things that go into designing a good menu that you wouldn't even consider. For example, it makes you write out a description of the dishes. You'll want to consider the price, which will make you think which ingredients are rare and what is considered a delicacy. And if you're an artist as well, then you can illustrate the dishes, which is fun. But yeah, I think making fantasy cuisines is a really, really fun part of world building, so I'm going to go into a lot more detail on this on my next video. But yeah, even if you don't use any of these exercises, I hope maybe it sparked some inspiration for you. I would love to hear your guys' favorite world building exercise below. We can all help each other out a little bit. And if any of you guys do try these out, please feel free to contact me. I would love to see what you do with it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.